Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Family Friday. Now, today will be a little bit different because I'm pre-recording this video. It'll be posted at noon, which is our normal Family Friday time here at the First Baptist Bonham Facebook page. But just because of some scheduling things this week and kind of how things went, I decided to go ahead and record it ahead of time and then just post it later on. So hopefully we'll be back to a more normal schedule next week, but hopefully this will still be encouraging to you today. So if you are joining up with us, please do me a favor and like our video, like our page. When you like our page, you can also select to follow and see our content first, so that way whenever you log into Facebook, whether you look at it on your phone or your computer or anything like that, you'll see updates from our page first. That would be very helpful to us to getting information and content to you guys. Also, so when you like the page, you can do that, or you can also share this video with other people. So if you share it to your page, that helps us reach a wider audience, and that's always very helpful. So today we're going to be talking about helping kids in grief and loss. So recently our church has experienced quite a few members who have died recently, and one of those was a family that still had some teenage children. And so I got to thinking about how would we help our children through something like this. And so I've put together today several tips on how we can help our children through this. You may think, well, this is really not a topic that I need to hear, except for death is no respecter of any person, and your children are going to lose aunts or uncles, grandparents, sometimes, unfortunately, even parents, and certainly at some point some other friends or family friends. And so we want to help our kids learn how to deal in a biblical and healthy way with grief, so that it doesn't totally just devastate them. It is a very devastating experience for sure, but one that hopefully we can approach with a knowledge and confidence in God, but also some tips to be able to move through in a healthy manner. So a couple things I'm going to start off here with are just some general ideas and then some more specific tips. So the first one is this: grief is a very unique experience for every single person, and this has to do with the fact that each of us are different. We have different personalities, different experiences, different preferences about different things. And so because grief is a very unique experience, the way that you grieve may not be the same way that your children or others around you are going to grieve. And so we have to be very humble and cognizant of this fact as we are around other people that are grieving. So perhaps our family has experienced the loss of someone we love. The way that I deal with it may not be exactly the same way that Melissa or our children deal with it. Now, that doesn't mean that anything is on the table, right? We have to avoid behaviors that are detrimental or certainly immoral. But when it comes to different things, like some people like more solitude, some people like more presence, some people immediately want to go back to church, some people want to ease back into it, some people find it easier to deal with the memories, and some people don't. And so it's just part of it is because we are unique people, and the relationship that we had with the person that we lost is unique. Then each grief experience is unique, and so us knowing this, especially about our children, will help us understand that each one of them may deal with grief a little bit differently. Now, the second general thing that I want to say to you is this. It seems self-evident, but we don't do it very well, is don't avoid it. One of the things that we often want to do with our children is to shield them from the realities of the world, and certainly want to progressively expose them to the things of this life and especially the more hurtful things of life. We don't want to throw all that on them at the same time. But nobody is benefited by avoiding or trying to forget that death is real and that grief is a part of the human experience. And so that doesn't mean we don't address it in age-appropriate ways, right? The way that you'll talk to a teenager about the death of a parent or grandparent or a friend is not the same way that you're going to talk about it with your 5 or 6 or 7-year-old. But no one is helped by avoiding the issue, right? It's necessary to get it out and open, and for us to provide the example of how to grieve. All right, so those are some general ideas, and I want to get into a few more specific things now. And there are quite a few of these All of them may not pertain at every single time, and there's probably much more to be said. I know there is much more to be said about this, but these are a few things I think you can start with. Whether you recently experienced a loss in your family and you're trying to help your kids and even your spouse or other people, or you will at some point. So the first thing is this: don't think that composure is the same thing as strength. This is a very common thing, especially among men, to think that, oh, I'm not going to cry, I'm not going to show you my emotions, I'm not going to display any of that because I need to be strong for my family. And that's not the same thing. Composure is not the same thing as strength. So there are times when composure is necessary and we need to, manage our emotions and whatnot, but strength is being willing and able to bear through a difficult circumstance, not to ignore it, not to pretend it hasn't happened, or anything like that. In fact, strength may be actually showing the depth of your love and grief for someone else. And so it's not the case that composure is the same thing as strength. There has to be a time when those emotions are displayed and we deal with the tears and the difficulties. In fact, as you cry, as you express those emotions, your children are going to learn to express themselves as well. And so how they see you handle the loss is going to impact and inform how they handle it as well. So your child needs an example, right? They need you to be an example. How you deal with the loss is going to, as I said, inform and instruct on how they deal with the loss. But that doesn't mean that you have to do it alone. In fact, you will need help. I think this is one of the big things if a child experiences the loss of a really close family member, like in this case with the father. Sometimes the children want to protect the other family members, and so they won't express or talk about what they're going through or what they're feeling because they don't want anybody else to hurt as well. But here's the deal: everybody is hurting, and so talking about it isn't going to make people hurt more. It's actually going to help people work through that hurt in a healthy manner. But it's often helpful if another party can come in. Maybe this is an aunt or an uncle, maybe this is a family friend or a trusted pastor who can be that listening ear and allow the kids, especially if they're teenagers, to talk about the feelings they're having, the things they're struggling with, the joys that may be also present, and different things that are going on in that way. So the next tip is this: pour on the love. This is one of the things about grief, is that grief shows us that presence is more important than almost anything else, right? We often want to say something or do something when someone experiences grief because we think that will comfort them. And sometimes that is good, right? We bring people food and we mow their grass and we try to alleviate them of some of the difficulties or the everyday activities of life to give them time and room to grieve. But I think it's actually presence that has the greater impact in the long run, right? Just being with somebody, letting them talk or letting them not talk if they don't want to, right? Giving a hug or a kiss, right? And I think it's especially important for children, right? Is that when they feel vulnerable and their life is kind of going crazy because maybe granddad died or grandma died or dad or mom or a friend or whoever, right? They want to know that things are safe and good and that their life is going to be stable. And so lots of hugs, lots of kisses can be a helpful thing in this respect. Now, some kids don't like that, right? Some people don't like a whole lot of touchy-feely, and so we need to respect people's wishes. But generally speaking, presence is a soothing balm to a hurting heart. The next thing I want to tell you about is flexibility and routine. This is especially true with children, is that death upsets the everyday routine of life. It seems like your whole life has stopped and things are crazy and the whole world is going on around you. And so we need to have a balance between flexibility and routine, right? Flexibility to not do our normal everyday things as we need, but for children, I think there's a need to return to a lot more routine, right? Bedtimes and meal times and homework and school and things like this, because that provides some stability and some structure for them, especially the younger that they are. So the older you get, you can kind of handle some of that more flexibility, but the younger your children are, the more likely they are to need that stability and that structure. The next thing is to be honest in your communication. As I said, we want to be age appropriate, but I don't think it's actually helpful to avoid words like death or dying or died with your children, even if they're smaller, because they need to understand the reality of the world in which they live. In fact, it can be very counterproductive to say things to your children like, well, they went away, or we're not going to see them anymore, or they went to sleep. Even though the scripture, for instance, uses a metaphor of sleep for death, kids are very literal, and they struggle to understand with that. And so that doesn't mean that we can't say things like, we're not going to see them for a while because they've died, right? They are no longer living here with us. But, of course, if they know the Lord, then we will see them again one day. And so I think dealing with those realities openly and honestly is helpful. Now, the younger kids are, right, it's going to be difficult for them to understand, when they're 2 or 3 or even 4. But as they get 5, 6, 7, they begin to understand what death is, even if they don't feel the full impact of that. And so I think it's necessary for us to be honest in our communication. The next thing is to invite them to talk about their memories and their stories, right? What's your favorite thing about Grandpa? What was the funniest thing that he or she ever did, right? And these kind of things. And so talking about those things at the level that they can is a good thing. It lets them express what's inside. And I think especially as kids grow up and get into teen years, this is especially important. Now, they may balk, they may not want to do this, and just, feel it out. But if you're working with kids, or maybe it's a family friend that has kids, right, give them a chance to open up and talk about their memories and their stories. In addition to this, I think it's helpful to record memories and stories. One of the things that my wife often talks about is that she wished she could remember things or she had written down some things to remember, because time tends to dull our memory, and we remember the big things, but a lot of the details fade away until we have something to jog our memory. And so if your child is old enough to independently read and write, then it can be helpful to have them journal or write some cards or something like this that record some of those details, their favorite stories, or maybe phrases that person said, or jokes that they like to tell, or places they like to go, or something like this. If your child isn't to the point where they can read and write on their own, then either you can help them and ask them and then record it for them, or you can ask them to create something, like maybe it's a picture collage, or maybe they draw a picture or color something that reminds them of their loved one to keep and hold on to. This is one of the things about grief, is that we do find meaning in things, and so I think it's helpful as the next tip to let them choose a memento, right? Maybe there's a picture they really liked and they can keep it in their backpack or their binder at school if they're of that age, or perhaps they want to keep one of their shirts to sleep in, or something like this. I think you can't keep everything for sure, and this is one of the things that grief forces you to deal with is stuff. But I think it's very helpful to keep mementos that kind of anchor our relationship with that person and remind us of their presence and the relationship that we have with them. And so the memento can be a powerful thing to hold on to bring comfort in time of need. I think another thing that we want to often do for our kids is to find some distractions, right? Grieving is an exhausting experience, and so we can't grieve constantly with no breaks. We need some relief from the constant pressure of it. And so I think distractions are good, right? Maybe you pick them up after school and you go get ice cream, or maybe you go watch a movie or something like this. So it just gives a little bit of time of distraction. And I think especially if you're having a time, maybe you sat at the kitchen table and you shared memories and everybody's kind of sad, but then maybe we play a game, right, for a few hours to lift our spirits. And so distractions can be helpful things to kind of lift us and give us a few moments of relief as we're dealing with that. Certainly on the spiritual side, we want you to be in prayer and in the Word, right? Pray with and for your kids about the person that you've lost, and don't shy away from that, right? Express to the Lord the difficulty and the longing that you have, and ask the Lord to help you with strength to build that hope in your heart, so that one day, right, you will be with them again. And certainly reading the Scripture helps us to understand death and life and the broken world that we live in from His perspective, and we begin to see that the Bible doesn't paint a rosy picture on the difficulties of life, but it does pair that with hope and joy that's found in knowing that God has a plan beyond what we can see in the moment, and that we can trust Him that He will keep His promises. And this is where that hope arises from. This is why Paul says, do not grieve as those who have no hope, right? We grieve, we ought to, because that's part of humanity, but we do so tempered with hope that knows that God will vindicate and bring all things back into being right. I think it's necessary to work back into church, right? Some people want to jump immediately back into church, and that's great. Some people find it difficult because that was a key family activity, and so it's difficult to go because they were reminded of their loved one that they lost while they're there, or something like this. I think it's important to get back into church, but everything, you don't have to immediately go the same way that you were, right? Try a service here, try a service there. And one of the difficulties about church is that everybody there cares about you, hopefully, and so they all want to know how you're doing, and that can be its own difficulty, its own exhaustion. And so it's necessary to kind of ease back in, but I do think the community of believers is necessary for true healing and hope and comfort. And so we can't isolate ourselves from those people, but it may take time to kind of progressively return to a more normal schedule there. The most important thing to do with your kids, certainly in grief, is to lead them back to Christ, right? Because there is no healing and there is no hope apart from Him. It's not that knowing Christ immediately makes me feel better or my life is all great, right? We're not teaching prosperity theology here where if you know Christ, everything will be great. But it does mean that the only foundation for a hope in the future and a healing in the present is by knowing the one who is the giver of all comfort and the one who can raise people from the dead. And so it's necessary that no matter what, we lead people back to Christ. So if your children don't know Christ yet, then this can be an opportunity for you to show them that the power of the gospel is that we can have hope in the face of difficulty, and we know that there's life in the face of death because Jesus has already conquered those things by dealing with our sin and reconciling us to God. If they do know Jesus, right, then we have to show them that these are times when it's really easy and we're tempted to push away or run away from God because we may not understand what He's doing. We may be angry with Him. But grief really is an opportunity for us to, as we deal with it, to draw close to God. As Peter says, right? Where else will we go, right? Who else has the words of eternal life? And so if we run from God, what we'll eventually find is that we have merely deprived ourselves of the one person that can really help us in every way, because He understands, right? He sent His own Son into the world to die so that we could have life, and so we must go to Him. The last thing I want to say to you is this. Just remember that this is a journey, right? Grief is something that you and your family embark upon, usually not by choice, of course, right? It's part of our life that we experience the death of those that we love in this broken and fallen world. But it's a journey, right? And things in life kind of bring some finality or some closure, but there's never ultimate closure, ultimate finality in this life, because we will always have a sense of that loss, right? Even if we're dealing with it healthily and we are doing things biblically, there are still going to be reminders of that person that's gone, right? We're going to see a picture, or we're going to go to a place or have a smell or something that will remind us, and we'll have sad moments and sad days, and all that's completely fine, right? That's just part of grieving. Even Jesus weeps when Lazarus dies. But, right, what we can do is make progress along the journey and approach the final day when Jesus will make all things right and all things good. Now, what I'm going to do here, since we didn't do this live, is you can certainly still interact with this post with the comments below, so feel free to put comments together. I'm also going to share a resource from a thing called Grief Share. Each year we try to do a Grief Share ministry. It's a 13-week session where we kind of help people through the process of grief. It's chiefly designed for adults, so it's not really something for kids, but a lot of the things I've told you today, I've drawn from that and our experience with that and our own family's experience with grief as well. And so I'm going to post below a video on helping your children grieve. It's about 47 minutes, so it's really long. It's designed for parents to watch and then help their kids. So if you're in that place, or maybe you're a grandparent or an aunt and an uncle and your family's experiencing some difficulty right now and you've lost someone you love, then take a moment to look at that and watch through it. And I think it will be really, really helpful to you as you help your family. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching today. I'm sorry this one was a little bit long just because of the nature of the content, but we hope that you'll visit us this Sunday at 9:30 a.m. for Sunday school or 10:45 a.m. for corporate worship. If you have questions about our church, feel free to give us a call at the office. You can find that number on the Facebook page. Or certainly you can visit us on our website at fbcbonham.com. There's lots of information about first-time visitors or even upcoming events on our church. You can email us from there. You can call us from there. So please visit us on one of those places so that we can get in contact with you and you can get in contact with us. In the meantime, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May His face shine upon you, and we'll see you again soon.